Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And in a way, it's Happy New Year. I haven't seen many of you since last year. So Happy New Year. Happy Chinese New Year anyway, right? That's pretty, yeah, so. Your attention, please. I love it, the meerkats. Yeah. I talked about that as a book cover one time, you know. Yeah, I want to talk about attention today. Your greatest power is your ability to direct your attention to wherever you wish. You can choose any object of attention that you wish. And through our attention, we create our life. Our life is what we pay attention to. Just think about that. Attention and life are much the same thing. Where our attention goes, our life energy will flow. So aware of the power of attention. Attention is also a great gift. It's one of the greatest gifts that we can give to anyone. It's the gift of love. You know, children want from their parents more than anything else attention, right? Look at me, look at me, look at me. If we love someone, we find it easy to give them our attention. You see? So attention and love are very closely related as well. Attention, your attention, is a very precious commodity. There's a multi-million-dollar industry created just to get your attention. This coming Super Bowl, as the Chiefs play in it. Wink, wink. Companies will pay millions of dollars, many millions of dollars, just for a few seconds worth of advertising. Why? Because they've got your attention. Or they try to get your attention, try to keep it. So I want to talk about attention in our Dharma practice. One of the facets of the Eightfold Path is that of bhavana, or mental training, mind training, often called meditation. And that consists of three forms: right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Right concentration, in many ways, is the starting point. And again, we talked about that earlier. Concentration is the ability to direct your attention and to hold it on a particular object, you see. Right, just notice where your attention goes. Have you chosen for your attention to go there, or is something pulling it there? With many of us, our attention is like a puppet on a string. It goes this way, and it goes that way, and it goes this way, you see. I remember talking to my kids when they were teenagers. I'd say, give me your attention. You could just see the blinds come down, you see. Even though they were looking at me, it was like I could tell there was nobody home, you see. So attention is a very powerful thing. We practice concentration by focusing on an object. Could be the breath. The breath we experience as a sensation in the body. Or we could focus on a sound. Om, you know, we focus on a chant. Or we focus on a mandala or yantra, some kind of visual symbol that we look at. Or maybe a image of a bodhisattva. So that's types of visual practice. But typically with concentration, we choose one sense gate and one object of attention. Just hold it right there. Come back to it time and time again. Every time the attention wanders, we come back to that chosen object. With mindfulness practice, on the other hand, what we are aware of is constantly changing. It's our present moment experience. It changes all the time. And with mindfulness practice, we try to be aware through as many sense gates as possible, through seeing and hearing, through sensing, through thinking, etc., etc. So mindfulness is kind of like a floodlight, whereas concentration is more like a laser beam. Both of these are important skills to develop in the Dharma practice. In our world today, we are not encouraged to concentrate. In fact, quite the opposite. One of the points I want to make today is that our use, and particularly our overuse of electronic media, is undermining our ability to concentrate. Our overuse of electronic media is undermining our ability to concentrate. So let's explore that. Let's unpack that a little bit. And look at the history of how we as human beings, or how we as Westerners, I should say Western human beings, have typically received information. 1455, what happened then? Gutenberg invented the printing press, Gutenberg Bible, first book printed. Prior to Gutenberg, we received information primarily from stories. You know, somebody came from another village, they would tell us a story. Maybe it was even a troubadour. They would sing us a ballad telling us a story. That's the way news was presented to us. That's the way history was recorded, in the form of stories. When we listen to a story, we're pretty much fully engaged. We're engaged with our ears. We're paying attention to the storyteller. We're creating in our imagination a whole different reality based upon the contents of that story. So when we're listening to a story, we're typically very involved. So much of the time before Gutenberg, that was how we learned. That was how we got our news. When the printing press became common, people began to learn how to read. We took in information in a very different way. Reading is very different than listening to a story. Because when you read, you're picking up one word at a time, you're taking those words, you're creating a story in your own mind. So, it's like storytelling, only you're creating the story out of the printed word. When we read, typically we're focused, we're concentrating. We're not engaged in with another person. Reading is a rather solitary activity compared to listening to a story. But reading also requires active involvement. It requires active imagination. We are part of the story. When we read, we're actively involved. And then, lo and behold, around 1950, the television showed up. It was a whole new way of receiving information. We listen to a story, we're actively involved. When we read, we're actively involved. When we watch television, what? It's very passive, you see. Very different way of receiving information. Just watch children when you tell them a story. Where are the children at? Right there. Look at children watching television. Where are the children at? Who knows where they're at, you know? You see. Passively, we absorb huge amounts of information from the television without even trying, you see. Now, most of us are loath to have our computers hooked up to the internet without some kind of a filter, a firewall, or a virus protection or something. And yet our minds are totally open to all sorts of screens, all sorts of information coming to us from every direction. There's no firewall. There's no virus protector. We just swallow it all. We bring it all in, you see. So the ways we absorb information have changed over the years. Then next comes what? The internet, of course. How do we receive information from the internet? Pop up here, pop up there, pop up there. It's very fragmented, isn't it? Very fragmented. It's very disparate. In other words, we're getting this information and that information. You know, here's starving children in Africa. Here's an ad selling toothpaste. Both of them coming at you at the same time, you see. We're deluged with information, but it's pieces, it's fragmented pieces. And so we begin to learn to be constantly distracted. The brain adjusts to receiving information the way it's used to receiving information. You see, for most of us now, reading is very natural. Years ago, people had to force themselves to read, but now, you know, when we think of left to right, I mean, that's just natural, right? But that just comes from the printed word. There's nothing natural about going from left to right. If you read Hebrew, you go the other direction. Chinese, you go a different direction. Japanese, you go a different direction, you see. So, we're used to taking in information in certain ways. What happens when we receive these unrelated bites of information constantly, the brain gets used to being distracted. It's used to being interrupted. And so what happens is it trains itself to be distracted. So that even when you're not on the internet, when you're not looking at your phone, the brain is still looking for pop-ups. The brain's a beautiful, beautiful organ. It's very, very adaptable. So that's its strength and perhaps its downfall as well. When we're used to taking in information in a fractured, fragmented way, then what happens is the brain gets used to being fragmented and fractured. There's no coherence. There's nothing cohesive. So what happens is instead of getting real information, we get pieces of sound bites. We get bumper stickers. We get little ads. There's little slogans that grab our attention. But we have no depth in any of this. It just goes boom, 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 a shotgun, scattered. Marketers know this. They take advantage of it. They take advantage of it to sell their product. Now, sometimes it's a politician that's selling his or her product, which is themselves and their story. Or it could be a conspiracy theorist. It could be any number of things, a hate monger. Whatever it is, they make use of this disparate, pop-up, fragmented information system that we have. And so, repetition. The brain learns through repetition. So if we keep getting peppered with something, it's almost subliminal over and over again. This is good, this is bad. This is bad, this is good. And we receive that over and over again. We wind up believing it, and we're not sure why we believe it. Sometimes we believe it even if we don't agree with it. We find ourselves believing it. And of course, once again, that's what marketers want, because they want you to buy their product, even if you don't know why you're buying the product. In fact, it's better that way, if you're motivated unconsciously, you see. So the brain is caught much like a fish. You know, there's a lure. The fish is sitting there, and this lure goes by, and this lure. Eventually, one of them's too yummy to pass up, and bam, you grab it. Then you're hooked, you see. It's also, in many ways, it's kind of like I went lobstering with my brother this summer. He lives on the coast of Maine, and took a little trip up there. And I was just very taken aback by the ingenuity of the lobster traps. You know, a little lobster finds it very, very easy to crawl inside the lobster trap. You know, there's bait in there, there's food, wide open door, y'all come, boom. Of course, you know the story. Once the lobster gets in there, he's loath to get out. And the bait still is unavailable to him. He still doesn't get the bait. We're much the same way. You know, I get on the internet, I want to Google something, look up some information. All of a sudden, here's a pop-up that says, Patrick Mahomes announces retirement. Well, who's going to miss that one, right? I mean, that's a lure no fish can miss, right? So you grab a hold of that, and pretty soon it's got nothing to do with Patrick Mahomes or retirement. You know, you're buying T-shirts, sweatshirts, tickets to Taylor Swift concerts. I mean, it's like pretty soon you don't know where you're at. So you can't separate fact from fiction. So everything becomes an infomercial. So there's no such thing as neutral information. Every bit of information has got a hook in it. Everything is trying to manipulate us. So it's a very interesting way to live. Not necessarily a healthy one, but that's the world we live in right now. So it's extremely important that we be aware of this. The use of electronic media is degrading our ability to concentrate. It feeds our impulses and it amplifies our craving. And that's the whole thing. It wants to get your attention. It wants to feed it with craving or aversion, and certainly delusion. We get pulled into these info vortexes, almost like a little tornado or something. You get pulled into a little vortex, and this keeps feeding itself. It's almost like a feedback system. You know, if you put a microphone in front of a speaker, what happens? Well, you get feedback back and forth to the point where it goes, it screeches. And that's exactly what happens. We keep getting more and more information, and pretty soon that information stimulates us to the point where people are acting and they don't know why. You know, like that young man that attacked the pizza house with a rifle. He showed up armed to the teeth, convinced that there was pedophiles in the basement of the pizza house. Of course, he was shot dead before he got there. But it's like that information is fed and fed and fed, and eventually it gets to the point where there's this overload on the nervous system, and people will act things out, and they don't even know why they're acting them out. You see. So, our social reality is being torn apart. When I talk about social reality, I mean the reality that holds us together as a society. In order to have a society, you have to have a common language, typically. Common language involves having an agreed upon reality. You know, you agree that blue is blue and red is red, and this means that, and that means that. And by these agreements, we have a culture. But when these agreements start breaking down, your culture starts to break down. There's no cohesiveness. So our whole society is sort of mimicking the internet in that it's fragmented with all these different unrelated pieces. So I want to be clear that I'm not demonizing anybody. I'm not making good people bad people. I'm not making right, I'm not making wrong. I'm just saying this is what's happening. That's all I'm doing, is saying this is what's happening, you see. So it's important to remember the true enemy is greed, hatred, and delusion. Without that, the whole system falls apart. It can't work without greed or hatred or delusion. That's what feeds this whole crazy machine. So coming back, it's just to summarize again, our attention is the greatest power we have. Please guard it carefully. Strengthen your concentration practice. Pay attention to your attention. Notice where your attention is at all times. Are you conscious of where your attention is, or have you just drifted into that, you see? Or has it been hijacked by some shiny object down here? If you can, I would suggest minimizing the use of electronic media. I mean, these days we all almost have to use it, but we use it much more than we need to, most of us, much more. I remember coming back from a retreat, a 10-day retreat at IMS, Insight Meditation Society. There was a young man got in the shuttle bus, sat down next to me, asked me what I had been doing, and I told him, I said, I came back from a 10-day retreat, and he said, what do you do there? I said, nothing. And he looked at me kind of strange. He said, well, you talk to one another, don't you? No, you can't talk. 10 days without talking? I mean, he looked rather like he wanted to get off the bus, you know? And I said, yeah. He said, I couldn't imagine that. He says, but you can use technology, can't you? You can text one another. I said, no. He said, 10 days without technology? Boy, the look on his face was as if I had a gun to his head. I mean, this poor fellow was petrified just at the thought of spending 10 days without his cell phone or without a computer. You see. So, do we own the computers, or do the computers own us? That's the whole question right there, you see. So, enjoy a good book. Take a walk in nature. Pay attention to what you pay attention to. Thank you for showing up this morning.